Hello, everybody, and welcome to the sixth session of the Pixel Project's sixth fall edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. My name is Anusha Kanasivam. I am your moderator for this session. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 14 award-winning and best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. Now, I'll be telling you a little more about the Read for Pixels session, uh, about the Read for Pixels fundraiser a little later in the session. We have lots and lots of exclusive author goodies. But meanwhile, if you want to find out more about the Pixel Project, go to the www.thepixelproject.net. I think we're having a bit of technical difficulty. Sorry, hold on. So we have James here today, but James, just hold on a second, because even though we have gone live, it doesn't seem to be appearing on YouTube. So just give me a second. Let me see if we can resolve it. Okay. Yeah, the ladies don't see us either. Okay, now they do. Okay, that was really weird. It's never happened before. Hold on now. Okay, let's continue. So everybody, James is here. We have a special, really amazing Q&A session with amazing James Moore. So let me give you a little introduction, just in case you don't know about James. James is the best-selling and award-winning author of over 45 novels, thrillers, dark fantasy, and horror alike, including critically acclaimed Fireworks, the Seven Forges series, Blood Red, the Serenity Falls trilogy, which features his recurring anti-hero Jonathan Crowley. His most recent novels are the Tides of War series, there's Avengers Infinity. And in addition to writing multiple short stories, he has also edited with Christopher Golden and Tim Levin the British Invasion anthology for Cemetery Dance publication. Now, James has very generously donated some treats for donors worldwide to the stash of author goodies that we have set up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. So there are two treats. The first one is the James A. Moore book bundle. So for one Read for Pixels donor, James is offering exclusive signed and personalized book bundle featuring one set of his Seven Forges epic fantasy series, which is all for paperback signed and personalized, and one advanced reader's copy of his upcoming book, Blood Red, also signed and personalized. Do you have them with you, James?
I have one of them with me.
That's it.
Gorgeous. And pictures of a couple more of them are right behind me.
Yeah. So guys, you can have a look. See if you can put it behind James. And there's just one of these two books, so donate to get them if anybody else does. And the second treat is the James A. Moore critique session, and this is available also for donors worldwide. So James is offering a chance to one lovely donor to have their work critiqued by him. So this opportunity comprises of you submitting one written critique of 10,000 words of your work in progress, and then there'll be one round of follow-up questions via email with James after he has sent you his critique. So there's only one of this treat available as well, and it's an extremely rare opportunity for anyone who is serious about writing SFF or horror books to get private feedback on their work in progress. And also because James is going to generously do this between his chemotherapy chemotherapy treatments. So he's spending some of his time critiquing your work. Thank you very much for that, James.
My pleasure.
The Pixel Project's work to end violence against women, so please do give generously. I'll be telling you a little later in the session how you can get your hands on all this amazing swag and how you can help the cause. So stay tuned for that. So James is going to do a reading now, and then we're going to have a live discussion. You're watching this on YouTube, so you can type your questions on the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. You must be signed into YouTube to do this. So type your questions in, and then our chat box moderators, Denisha and Xiaojin, are going to relay the questions to James and I will read them out loud, and then James will answer them. Okay. So, James, I'm going to put you on screen, and you can comment your reading and tell us a bit about what you're going to read.
Absolutely. So Seven Forges has a lot of characters. One of my favorites is a character named Swetch. Swetch is oddly innocent in a lot of ways. She's also probably one of the most deadly killers in the book. Her body count is higher than anybody else's in the entire series, actually. So with that in mind, the scene that I picked is a scene where Swetch is going into one of the cities in Fulane for the first time and running across this again with a certain innocence. While Captain Mara Stolver is also along with this. When she goes wandering off on her own in one of the shady parts of town, he gets worried and comes after her. And that's the scene that I'll be reading now. They came into the city of Lawrenceport without fanfare. That was the way Maros wanted it. This was really the first chance that the Sabbat Talur had to meet up with the people of Fulane, and he wanted the situation to be uneventful. We seldom get what we want from the world. They were low on supplies, and while the people with him believed in hunting for their own food, they were not in an area where that was made easy. There were cattle around, to be sure, but they were owned by the people raising them. Since he rather liked the idea of avoiding an incident, they went into Lawrenceport, and because the notion of a bed appealed to him, they stayed at one of the larger inns. He had the good sense to at least make sure that Safa and the rest of the mounts were placed in a stable that was cleared of other animals. And because he'd been given money, he arranged for the local butcher to deliver a lot of raw meat. A lot. The beasts were sated, or at least he hoped they were. After that, it should have been easy enough to handle matters. He and Swetch and a lean, hard man named Blaine went shopping for supplies. Perhaps he'd grown too accustomed to being with the Sabbat Talur. Perhaps he was simply tired, or perhaps it was a combination of the two. Whatever the case, Maros failed to give enough warnings. The people with him stared at everything as much as he had surely stared at the great keep where he met the king in iron. There was little about Fulane that resembled their valley and their world. While they were there purchasing supplies, and Maros was haggling with a very determined baker regarding the need for at least 24 loaves of bread. He had a passionate need for freshly baked bread after the last couple of months. Swetch wandered off. He looked for the woman who would become his new right hand for the trip, and when he couldn't find her, he asked Blaine where she had gone. Blaine was looking at an assortment of cheeses as if they were the most complete mystery he'd ever encountered. He turned to Maros and pointed to his right in a vague way. She went there. Where? In that direction. The baker looked in the same direction with a frown on his face. Your friend is a woman? This is not the right place for a lady. Before Maros could ask what the man meant, there was a loud scream. It did not sound like Swetch, and that was a good thing. But it most decidedly sounded like trouble. The second scream, that one sounded like Swetch. Maros was moving a moment later, and without even thinking about it, he drew his sword. The blade felt comfortable in his hand, as it always did after the years he'd been carrying it. Later, after everything was done, he would remember what Tusk had said when they talked about how the weapon he had forged for himself felt like a part of him. For now, he concentrated on Swetch and protecting her from whatever she might try to hurt her. She was a stranger here, and he felt like a fool for letting her wander off. The pathways between buildings grew narrower in the area off the market square. There were additional vendors to be found, of course, but they were the ones who could not afford shops or who sold merchandise of more dubious natures. Like as not, the reason the baker had warned him was because someone was selling women. Or possibly there was a gang who felt they had the right to take whatever they wanted from women by force. Either way, Meros would make them pay dearly for hurting Swetch if they managed. He came around a shop corner just in time to watch Swetch drive her elbow into a thin man's throat hard enough to crush his trachea into a new shape. The man fell back, clutching at his ruined neck and rapidly reddening in the face. His eyes were wild and rolled desperately. He fell back against the wall and fought for his balance and his breath alike with no success. While that man was choking on his own internal injuries, Swetch caught another man with a swipe of open fingers across his face that made him scream in pain. While he was trying to recover from the assault, Swetch moved against him a second time, her arm moving fast enough for Meros to just make out the way she caught the stranger's arm with hers, and then brought her free arm in to shatter the bone between his elbow and his shoulder. While the first man was collapsing on the ground and turning redder still, on his way to a dark purple, the second man was shrieking while she bent his arm into a new shape it had never meant to take. Bone fragments punched through the muscles, and the gods granted the man the mercy of unconsciousness. 3 more men were in the area. One of them was dead on the ground, his head canted at an unnatural angle from his neck. The other 2 were staring at the woman who had just destroyed their friends with wide, terrified eyes. Meros knew exactly how they felt. For a second, he'd forgotten himself, forgotten the people he was traveling with. In a fit of madness, he let himself think that Swetch was anything like the women he'd been raised with. Had he not seen the weapon she carried, her proficiency with a bow? Swetch dropped into a crouch and stared in the general direction of the 2 remaining men. They did not stand still. They ran for dear life. Really, the sort of women that would team up with 4 others, sort of vermin that would team up with 4 others to tackle one woman would hardly be expected to stay around. Swetch looked like she was thinking about chasing after them, but changed her mind at the last moment. Meros looked at her and marveled at her, really. Swetch turned to look in his direction, and when she saw who was staring at her, she relaxed. The way her body moved was quickly becoming a second language for him. Meros seldom realized how much he depended on facial expression until he dealt with the Sabatalor. With only their eyes to go by, he was beginning to understand how much the way a person who stood or even sat could convey a great deal. "You were angry with me?" Her words were curiously soft. "What?" He looked at her. "No, not at all. You were defending yourself, obviously. I was angry myself for not warning you." The man whose throat she had crushed thrashed and shuddered behind her, and a moment later it was as still as the death that had come to claim him. "Do the men in your land always try to mount women they do not know?" No. He spat. "No, but some of the men think they have that right. They are wrong." She shook her head and then moved toward him. She dismissed the dead and dying as if they did not matter. In truth, they didn't. Not really. They would possibly be troubled if they lingered, and less if they moved on. So he moved with her back toward the bakery. "What made you come this way?" Swetch looked at the small carts where vendors were suddenly reappearing. They had been gone as soon as the trouble started, and now they were back as if they had remembered it was rude to watch a woman get raped. Now that the possibility was gone, they were glad to once more hawk their wares. "That one." She pointed to a flat cart where a withered crone of a woman crouched over a collection of baubles and tokens. There were medallions and rings and an assortment of well-crafted leather works, all meant for decoration rather than any practical use. Meros smiled. Of course a woman would find the jewelry. He shook that thought away. The woman in question had just killed 3 men with frightening ease. Best not to underestimate her. "You see something you like?" "What does it do?" She pointed to a bronze medallion of a feathered serpent adorning it. The craftsmanship was exemplary. Like as not, the lady in question had either stolen a few of the pieces, or she was dealing with someone from the Guntha. The winged snake was one of their symbols. The items she sells? Nothing. They're meant to be pleasant to look at and to wear, that is all. Switch stared at him for a moment, her eyes wide with wonder. "They mean nothing?" "Well, I suppose they mean something to someone." He pointed to the medallion she'd been looking at a moment ago. "This is a symbol to the people we're going to observe. Here, in this area, it is just a pretty piece to wear around the neck." The old crone tending the cart looked from Swetch to Meros and back again, and then snatched the medallion that had struck Swetch's fancy and held it out for her. She shouted in the local language. Same language, but with a sharp, fast dialect that even Meros had to listen to carefully. offering the prize as a reward for having stopped the group of men from hurting anyone else. Swetch stared hard at the woman for a moment while Meros translated and then waved the offer away. Tell her I did not do this for her, but because they offended me. I would no more take her offering than I would steal from her. Meros conveyed the message, and though she seemed puzzled, the woman nodded her head in understanding. As they walked a short distance back to the bakery, Meros kept his eyes peeled for signs that the two who got away might want to come back with reinforcements, but he saw nothing. She merely wanted to say thank you. No, Swetch shook her head. She wanted to feel better about not stopping the men or reporting them. I'm not here to make her feel less guilt. Meros chose not to argue the point. Instead, he asked, where did you learn to fight that way without weapons? Ramesh tells us we must never forget the body and mind are weapons before the tools are weapons. Ramesh is one of your gods? Of course. He resisted the urge to roll his eyes. But who taught you? Swetch stopped just before they reached the bakery. We are taught. From the time we can stand, we are taught all the ways of the Daxar Talar. We are always taught. We are always learning. She patted the blade on her belt and gestured to the short sword he knew was strapped to her side. Before we can forge a blade, we are taught. When we walk, we are taught. When we hunt, when we grow crops, we are always taught. He nodded his head and smiled. This was one of the differences he was trying to understand. The Salat Talur seemed to take for granted that everything they did was about learning the ways of their gods. Everything. From the way they walked to the way they trained their mounts, everything seemed directly connected to their deities. He wasn't sure if he envied them their connections to their gods or pitied them their delusions. Time would tell, he supposed. The baker called to him. There were negotiations to finish. Blaine nodded. He seemed indifferent to the events that had unfolded. As far as the man was concerned, it was simply another day, and Swetch had never been in danger. Then again, considering what she had done to those three men, Blaine seemed to have the right mentality. And there we have it.
Thanks, James. I remember reading that scene. It was very interesting. I'm just going to put myself back on for a moment. Sorry if you missed the beginning. There was a little technical glitch, and very sorry for that. So let me tell you why we're here. So this is the Read for Pixels campaign, part of the Pixel Project's collaboration with 14 award-winning best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. And we have a fundraiser going. We have lots and lots of exclusive author goodies set up on our Rally Up page, which I will tell you about a little later in the session. But if you want to find out more about the Pixel Project, meanwhile, please go to www.thepixelproject.net. Now, you just saw a really amazing reading by James Moore, and we're going to come back to that. But I have a few questions. And guys, if you have questions, please do type them up in the chat box on YouTube, and James will endeavor to answer all of them. Okay, so I'm going to jump in straight to the question. So one about your female characters. Now, we just saw one, Swetch. She's amazing. She's badass. She's a leader. And there are so many others I can think of. One of them is Natya. They are complex characters. They are human. They are flawed. They're not always who they seem to be. So could you tell us what or who are your inspirations for your female characters?
Well, I was raised by a very strong mother and three older sisters. My father was not in the picture. So I was raised with the understanding that women actually have brains and intelligence and the ability to think on their own and the ability to be strong. My mother was an incredibly strong woman. For me, that was never even an issue. I took it for granted. And I've met many, many women over the years who are genuinely strong, genuinely intelligent, and very independent. Those are my favorite people. Strong, intelligent, and independent. I don't care what the gender.
Yeah. It's a bit strange or funny sometimes where authors or other people kind of forget that women are also people and, can be just a person like a man, right? Don't you think it's? Do you find that happening a lot in books, in writing, in TV, in movies?
I think it happens too much in the world. And I've run across several books where every woman was a sexual object and little more, and that's just pointless to me. Good heavens, why would you want to have a relationship with somebody that's just physical? And if you did, why would you want to continue hanging around with them? Carnal knowledge is a wonderful part of a relationship, but it's not the end all be all. At the end of the day, I enjoy my wife's company and the conversations we have far more than any other part of my life. That's why I married her.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. So now all genres have their shares of female stereotypes and tropes. How do you, as a writer, break stereotypes to create female characters with agency while dealing with the world around her, including situations that involve sexism and misogyny and violence against women and girls?
Well, first you have to acknowledge that they happen. I don't like that they happen, but you have to acknowledge it. One of my recent novels, Boomtown, has a warning in advance because it's set in the Wild West, and there are a couple of scenes, though I try to put them as simply as I can, certainly not to make them sexually exciting, where women are attacked. So I had to put a warning on that. It's only fair. But then you have to turn around and look at Seven Forges and Swetch. The fact of the matter is that a lot of women are victims. And a lot of times it's expected that they will be victims. Culturally, that's different from place to place. That's what I wanted to do with Seven Forges.
Yeah.
In the realm of the Seven Forges, every person is ready to be a fighter, period. Doesn't matter what gender they are. And I had to show that, and I wanted to show that clearly with Swetch. She is nobody's victim. That goes with her entire culture. They are first and foremost warriors, and everything else is secondary. In the case of the Empress, Nasha, she was busy having a nice life of leisure and suddenly got dropped into the position of Empress and had to take it very seriously. And all the partying and all the things that she was enjoying before that had to go to the wayside in order to take care of literally an entire empire. So I try to make it different with each character. There are the sisters, three stunningly beautiful women in these books. And several critics have said, of course they're all beautiful. Of course there's a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead. Well, yeah, because of course they're shape changers. They chose to look that way. Why would they want to look any other way? They want to look beautiful. They use their sexual appeal as a weapon. And they're strong enough to handle themselves without it.
Yeah. So your female characters, like you said, they're so varied, and I guess they're not stereotypes, and which means they are also generally flawed in some small way, as all people are really. When you write female characters, do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural stereotypes to make them likable or relatable? And do you ever get any flack for not making a female character likable enough?
I've gotten a little flack from time to time, but not much. And most of that flack is coming from, quite frankly, middle-aged white guys who want their fantasies taken care of. Take care of your own fantasies. I'm writing stories for me.
Yeah, preach. So as a male author, do you face any particular challenges when writing female characters well?
I like to think that all the characters are challenging. But when it comes to writing well, fact, even the characters that aren't always strong, male or female, have to be treated like proper people. If the story changes and things are changed for them in the course of the story, I try to deal with that as a person would deal with that. I've never been in a sexual assault situation, but I have been assaulted. I can't fully encompass and understand what goes on with a sexual assault, but I know that it's a victimization. It's not about the sex. It's about the violence. It's about control.
Yes. All right. So in your stories, there is usually a very strong sense of women being present in the world, that they matter, something you don't always see in novels. In fact, you mentioned it just now, Seven Forges is sort of a story of a society where men and women are completely equal. And if I may, it could be seen as a sort of a study in feminism. What actually inspired you to create a story about this kind of society where everyone is equal no matter their gender?
I just think it's a lovely idea. I think that everybody should be treated as an equal, period. I don't care what your race is, your religious beliefs, your skin color, any of it. Doesn't matter to me. Everybody should be treated equal. In a perfect world, everybody would be. Sadly, it is not a perfect world.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, I guess. Did you ever get any feedback or flack for making a society where I guess people in this world would sort of say it's unbelievable, or it's not historically accurate? Did you ever find any comments like that?
Happily, no, but to be perfectly honest, I'm writing hard fantasy.
Yeah.
I'm not even trying to share our world.
You'll be surprised. We've had some authors who said they had received feedback for sort of people saying, "Oh, you're clearly writing a fantasy story, but it's sort of based on our world's history, and it's not accurate because the women are in power." And they're like, "But it's fantasy; it can be whatever I want it to be, right?"
Exactly.
Yeah, there are people like that in the world. Yeah. So
there's plenty of them. They're silly. We don't have to try to make the world just like this world. That's what it's all about. Doing our own thing.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So going back to Seven Forges, there are some really interesting scenes and conversations. The one you read just now, it's where the character Maros is proven wrong on some stereotypical things. When he thought Swetch was going to be assaulted and he needed to go and save her, but finds her instead beating up a gang because she is a badass warrior and she knows how to take care of herself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there's another scene I remember where Maris learns that it is actually not an insult to call a Pramarish man a woman. So why did you include these kind of scenes, and what do you think your readers, men and women, can take away from it?
Well, again, one of the things I wanted to do with these novels was have a serious culture shock.
Yeah.
You got medieval Europe, for lack of a better way to put it, up against an entirely different culture that's nothing at all like theirs. You got males and females, but they're treated exactly the same, and that's very puzzling. There are no titles for female leaders versus male leaders. They're all king, period. There's no queen or princess or empress. They're all just the same gender. They don't even have words to separate them along those lines.
I
think things are very, very important. You have to show the differences, and I wanted that to be a shock to people.
Yeah, I think you kind of achieved that. It was quite refreshing for me as a woman.
Thank you.
To read, especially that scene where they're talking about, they're sort of bandying about, they're gossiping, I guess, and they find out that it's not an insult to call a man a woman, and it's so confusing to these people. Like, why would that be an insult? I'm like, yeah, why would that be an insult? Because women are the same. Yeah. So now, speaking with Maros, that one of the main characters, now he seems at first to be your stereotypical hard-edged soldier, but he's actually empathetic and he cares about his people, which is pointed out by other characters. Now, he clearly admires women. He's always thinking about them. But
oh yeah.
Yeah, but never in his thoughts or actions is he disrespectful or thinks that he can do what he wants with women. Why did you write him like this?
Because there are a lot of people out there who are like that. And not every soldier has to be a jackass. And he's a career soldier. Yeah. And I wanted to show that. Not every cop that's out there is crooked or out there to cause grief. A lot of these guys are doing their jobs and being as respectful as they can in all situations. And I wanted Maris to reflect that fact.
Yeah. This
is a man who's been a soldier all life.
That was another refreshing thing.
That doesn't mean he has to be a dumbass about it.
Sorry, could you say that again?
I said, this is a man who's been a soldier his entire life, but that doesn't mean he has to be a dumbass about it.
Yes, you're totally right. Yeah, so speaking of being a dumbass, uh, your Crowley, he's not a dumbass. He's a pretty cool character himself, but he is an anti-hero, and he has a past with a capital P because terrible things happened to his wife and children that played a part in him being what he is today or in doing what he does. And there are so many stories that rely on toxic tropes of fridging or some violence being done to women to fuel a man's character and story. And there's so many stereotypes of toxic masculinity in stories nowadays. Do you think reframing stories away from this kind of backstory and this kind of toxic stereotype towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways SFF writers can break away from toxic tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women?
Absolutely. I also think it depends on the story and where you're going with it. Frankly, if I had written Joan Crowley, I would have had the exact same story.
Mm.
His family would have been destroyed by a demon out of vengeance and to make him suffer, or in this case, her to suffer. But yeah, it's a problem that it's a Hollywood trope that too many people fall for. Not every guy out there who's alone is alone because his family was destroyed or his girlfriend was tortured. And it's an easy cop out. Find better ways.
Do you think that eventually this violent alpha male type character is going to be phased out of SFF cultures worldwide as we start kicking out toxic masculinity, or do you think it's just one of the stereotypes that's going to stick around for much good?
I think it will probably always stick around to one degree or another, but hopefully it will fade down substantially. Really, again, that's one of the reasons I did what I did with Swetch.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to show that that doesn't have to be the only way you can get a character to where he's going. Swetch can take care of herself. Meryl doesn't have to sweat that part.
Okay.
He gets to worry about the other things that are more important.
Yeah, exactly. There are more important things to worry about. uh, okay, guys. So if you've just joined us, we're here with James A. Moore. We're asking him questions about feminism in pop culture, about violence against women, about his characters, men and women. And you can jump in with your questions as well. Don't forget to type them up in the YouTube chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. But meanwhile, I have a lot more questions for you, James.
Fire when ready, my dear.
So now let's go to sex and sexuality. There's a really natural, open-minded attitude to sex and sexuality in the characters in your stories. There's nothing gratuitous about the depiction of either sex or sexual violence. You mentioned it briefly just now, but was this a conscious decision on your part?
Absolutely. First off, I think it's far too common for people to spend too much time on that kind of part of a story. I'm not a prude. I just don't think it's necessary. I'll mention the fact that it happened, but I'm not there trying to write an X-rated scene. Intimacy is intimacy. By the same token, I'm not turning around and writing a large scene about somebody going to the outhouse. It's a natural function. I'm going to mention that it happened, but I'm not going to give you the graphic details. Nobody needs them. Nobody wants them. And I think it's a better way to keep things respectful and moving along at the right speed.
Yeah, and focusing on what's actually important.
Erotica.
So there's there's this ongoing discussion still about the portrayal of rape in film and television and rape culture within pop culture. So, and when one thinks of violence against women in epic fantasy, Game of Thrones is often touted as the sort of the poster child for using copious amounts of gratuitous violence against women. What are your thoughts on this?
They certainly used it, but that wasn't the only thing they did in those situations. There were just copious amounts of sex.
Yes, there were.
They didn't really portray violent rape very often. They inferred it more than they showed it. Again, unfortunately, it's that kind of culture. It's once again set up to look like medieval Europe in a lot of ways, and medieval Europe was not nice to women. This is part of trying to develop an enlightened society. You don't see it as often in science fiction, certainly not in the Star Trek world.
Yeah.
Where equality is a given.
So the line between consent and coercion is not always clear in fantasy, whether it's epic fantasy or urban fantasy or paranormal romance. Do you think it's an issue that writers in the genre have started tackling successfully in recent years?
I think we're getting better about it. I think there's still a long ways to go. But this is part of an evolving society. You know, back in the day, casual racism in books and in stories was accepted. And now, to a very real extent, it's not. I think that actually been handled a lot better in a lot of cases than sexuality and sensuality. So, you know, people need to open their eyes and remember this too. Women are not second-class citizens any more than African Americans are second-class citizens or Asians are second-class citizens. It's not all about being white and male.
Yeah.
Said the white man.
No, but you know, we need people like because to other white and male people who don't see things the same way that you are. So which brings me sort of to your next question. You're an author. Stories are one of the most powerful ways of bringing about culture. In an author's strike of telling between raising awareness about violence against women while telling an engaging story without being pedantic or preachy.
If a scene of violence is required for the story, have it there. But don't get gratuitous. There's no call for it. I have horrible scenes of violence in several of my books. But I very seldom exploit the violence against women to make it a titillating thing. It's a part of the story. I put it there. I'm not getting graphic into how much the rapist is enjoying it or how little she is, aside from the fact that she obviously doesn't want to be there. It's kind of an odd thing for me. I've never thought of that kind of thing as sexually exciting. So I have no desire to write it, and I have no desire to read it. But, you know, remember that the people who are reading your stories might have experiences of their own that are being traumatized by these things. The last thing I ever want to do is cause somebody to have a flashback to a horrible event in their life while I'm writing. Mm-hmm. I want them to enjoy the tale, and I try to remember that.
So, like you said just now, you write quite violence-saturated stories. I mean, some of your books are classified as grimdark, epic fantasy, they're horror and thrillers. How do you find a balance between showing violence as an integral part of the story and also giving the reader a realistic depiction of the violence and not showing violence gratuitously as violence for its own sake?
If you're doing your job the right way, you can use suspense to build up a lot of stuff. And frankly, I think the average writer, or actually the average reader, has a better imagination than a lot of people give them credit for. Let me give you one of my favorite examples. Author Ramsey Campbell got a letter once from a fan who was very, very offended by a scene he had done. In that scene, the fan recited the horrible graphic violence he committed on a character that was never in the book. He built the suspense so well that when he got to the one line of violence, the reader imagined the rest of it, built it up in their own mind that way. The entire violent scene that he wrote was, it tore his arm off. That's it. That's all he said. That's all he needed to say, because the buildup took care of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you have to, you know, show the full damage that's done when an axe hits somebody in the head. You let them know they got hit in the head, and it's done. Anybody with any imagination understands it from that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah. So now, how do you think that stories that explore this theme that women can be empowered persons in their own right and then men should respect women can help stop violence against women?
I think if it's handled the right way, it's self-explanatory. Let's look at Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is pretty much the start of modern urban fantasy when you get right down to it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the strongest characters in the book. Physically, she can take on just about anybody, and does. Emotionally, sometimes she's a basket case, because she's a teenager in high school, and because she's dealing with horrible things every day. The catch is to remember that even the strongest person has vulnerabilities. Without that, you end up with, what's the term, Mary Sue's. Nobody likes Mary Sue. Even Superman has kryptonite. There has to be a human factor to them in order to make them work. Does that make sense?
So, yes, it does. Yeah. It's just, it comes back to, I guess, women being human too. So
absolutely,
nobody can be perfect. So speaking of women being human, now your stories pass the Bechdel test. It has a depiction of complex and interesting relationships between women, and they don't just talk about men. Why do you think many SFF authors still have trouble writing stories that pass the Bechdel test, despite the fact that there are many more things that women talk about other than men? And what can you suggest for writers who want to write female conversations and relationships realistically?
One of the most amusing lines in a movie I ever heard had a character asking Jack Nicholson, who was a writer in the book in the movie, how do you write such convincing female characters? And his off-the-cuff answer was, I just write about men, and then remove all sense of accountability. Which is a silly answer, but kind of halfway true. Remember that women are people too. Remember that just like men in the locker don't always talk about how cute someone is, sometimes they're talking about movies or sports, or what they had to dinner last night, or what they're planning to do next weekend. Women do the same thing. It's not always about the opposite sex. It might be when you're 15 and 16, but not for the rest of the world. The problem is for a lot of people is they look at the opposite sex as an incredible mystery. Well, they are, and it's a lovely mystery. But that doesn't mean you have to stare at a wall and wonder about the one thing that you're focusing on in an infatuation. You might be thinking about sex with Jane. Jane may not be thinking about sex with you. Jane might be thinking about the fact that she's got to go home and feed the dog and get the plumbing taken care of at the house. And she's thinking about that even if she happens to be dating you at the same time.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's sort of part of the human condition to not realize that other people don't have the same thoughts as you? Especially, it seems, not realize that women have the same kind of problems and same kind of thoughts that you do.
I don't think it's part of the human condition. I think that's a cop-out. I think we're often programmed to think that way. Well, break the programming, kids. Again, once upon a time, it was considered perfectly socially acceptable to look at somebody of another race as automatically inferior. Well, that's garbage, and we know it's garbage. Anybody that doesn't want to acknowledge that is being bullheaded, and they need to get past it.
So, do you think it's important for influential authors such as yourself? Sorry to interrupt. So, do you think it's important for influential authors such as yourself, who are read all over the world, to make a conscious effort to include characters in your stories that show readers the importance of respecting women as equals and human beings?
I'm of two minds on that, yes and no. I think it's an important lesson that we need to help spread. At the same time, I don't think that I'm going to preach that to the point where it overwhelms my story. Does that make sense? I'm here to entertain. Yeah. If I can educate in the process, cool. But my first job is to entertain. Swetch was a conscious effort on my part. I wanted her to be a badass. I wanted her to be really, again, possibly the most terrifying fighter in the entire thing. Swetch kills hundreds of people in the first book alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in hand-to-hand combat.
Okay. We have a few questions coming in from the audience. I'm just going to go to one or two.
Sure.
So question one is from Andrew Brockhorst. He asked, what would you recommend as an entry point into your horror work? Take that whatever way you like.
That's a darn good question. Go with Boomtown. One, it's easily accessible, and two, I think I did a good job with it. Added bonus, it's a weird Western.
Okay. From I can put it up. Regina asked, can you share some tips for portraying female characters in horror or grimdark fantasy who have experienced gender-based violence without reducing them to the sum of their trauma?
Absolutely. Remove the gender. Violence is violence. Violence against women, well, personally for me, is more abhorrent, and certainly sexual violence is more abhorrent. The end result is still trauma. Now, some people get past that fairly easily, and some people don't, but each individual is going to be different. I have known women, many of them, unfortunately, who have been in sexual assault situations, and some of them are almost blasé about it because that's how they're dealing with it, and others can't deal with it easily. And I've known several men who were sexually assaulted, and it's the same situation. Some of them dealt with it easily, and some of them never quite got past it. Everybody is different. Try to remember that.
Okay. Right, I'm going to go back to some of our questions. Guys, I think the audio is a bit patchy here and there, but I think you can hear James very clearly, so that's what's important. So my next question is about geek culture in general. So geek culture, including science fiction and fantasy, has had its share of critics that say that it's still too male-dominated, despite there actually being a rising number of prominent and well-respected known female authors. There is still plenty of hostile, misogynist, and sexist behavior by male geeks towards female geeks. What do you think needs to be done to make geek culture as a whole, whether it's comics or gaming or books or cons, more welcoming for women and girls?
As a general rule, there's not much you can do about misogynists. The problem is that they're hateful. Oftentimes they're hateful because they're jealous. Oftentimes they're hateful because they don't feel they've been treated properly by the opposite sex. And the end result of that is get the hell over it. Nobody gets treated the way we want to get treated by everybody all the time, period. It's just never going to happen. Be nice. Be kind. It costs you nothing. If somebody happens to like the same things that I like, awesome. We have something in common. You're part of my tribe. If somebody likes the same stuff that I like and they're upset with me for being the opposite sex, walk away. Your opinion means nothing to me. If you're going to whine about the fact that other people than you like something, that's on you. Get past it. Grow up. Again, it's not the 1920s. How dare a girl like science fiction? Well, screw you. She likes science fiction. Good, we have something we can talk about. I think that's a lovely thing. I get to share with these people. Anybody that doesn't understand that isn't trying. And sadly, that's often a common occurrence. They don't want the world to change. They want Buck Rogers to be the one that matters, and Dale Arter just to be there as a sidekick or as love interest. Well, she's got a story too, and it may not be Buck's.
Right. Yeah, it's about sharing. I don't understand that as well. We've had a few other sessions with other authors where people in the audience have also asked this question, and just said they don't understand why they don't think it's possible why people don't think it's possible to share, and welcome. You're basically welcoming new people who are interested in what you're interested in. Isn't that a great thing?
one of my favorite sayings on that is not pie. If you have a slice of this and I have a slice of this, everybody has a slice. It's not going to run out. If you don't like a particular author or story, don't read them. If that movie doesn't appeal to you, don't watch it. But why would I stomp on somebody else for first having an opinion, and second for sharing an interest with me? That's just stupid. Why would you want to be more bitter and alone?
Yeah.
The rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah. So we have a comment from the audience who actually said the same thing that you did. Greek culture is not pie. There's something for everyone. And
Exactly.
another question from Andrew Buckhurst, if you want to take it.
Sure.
He says, in that vein, do you have any thoughts about the sad puppy phenomenon in the Hugo Awards?
Yeah, the sad puppy part is a proper aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody threw them a bone. Wah. Somebody else got attention. Wah. Grow up. Get over it. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Grow up.
Yeah, it is. You're totally right. I think we all agree with that. Okay, so
apparently you're wounded. So get over it.
Okay, guys, so if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to start wrapping up. So this is your last chance to type in your questions. Meanwhile, while I wait for you, I'm going to ask my final question. Well, it's actually a two-part question, and it's a bit of an obvious, Captain Obvious question to you, James. You've been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. So can you tell us, why do you support the cause to end violence against women, and what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
Well, first, I happen to have a lot of friends who are women. And I would never want to see any of them hurt. And second, half the population is women. Calm down. Treat them with respect, the way you want to be treated. Follow the golden rule. I'm not going to walk down the street and watch somebody slap anybody around. I'm certainly not going to let a guy my size, 5'10" or taller, slap around a woman who's 5'4". Physically, he might be stronger, but that doesn't mean that might makes right. Do the right thing, people. It's not hard. You get angry, walk away. You get angry, talk it out. You can't talk it out, walk away. Have the discussion another way. Send them an email. Or just don't hang around that person if they're toxic. But absolutely, positively, there's no justification for violence against women. Period. None. If a woman comes at me with a knife, I might defend myself. But other than that, nothing. No justification.
Yes, we agree. You're right. Thank you for saying that, James.
My pleasure.
All right. So, I should reactions from the audience. Andrew Brockhurst agrees wholeheartedly here, and this is, I think, for your answer to the previous question, which is all those people should just grow up and get over themselves. And Regina says yes. So yeah. Okay, so guys, that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you all for your questions, and thank you, James, for giving us such great answers and sharing your perspective with us. I'm gonna put myself back on. Hi, guys. So I promised to tell you just now about the author goodies that we have set up on our Rarely Up fundraising page. Now, as mentioned earlier, James has generously donated a couple of treats for donors worldwide to the stash of author goodies we have set up as perks for donors on the Read for Pixels Rarely Up fundraising page. So there are two treats that James has put up there. One is the James A. Moore book bundle. So this is for one Read for Pixels donor. James is offering an exclusive book bundle featuring one set of his Seven Forges epic fantasy series. This is all 4 paperbacks signed and personalized, and one advanced reader's copy of his upcoming book, Blood Red, also signed and personalized. So there's just one set available to a donor, so please donate and get it before someone else does. Treat number 2 is the James A. Moore critique session. So James is offering a chance for one lovely donor to have their work critiqued by him. comprised you sending in one written critique of 10,000 words of your work in progress, and then one round of follow-up questions via email with James after his critique. There's also only one of this treat available. It's a very rare opportunity for anyone who is serious about writing SFF or horror books to get private feedback on their work in progress, because James is battling cancer and he is generously offering to do this critique in between his cancer treatments. So now, there are many more treats available on the Relia page. We have goodies available from authors including Alison Goodman, Hilary Monahan, Alma Alexander, Sarah Langan, and this week is Epic Fantasy Week. So if you fancy goodies from some of the best epic fantasy authors writing today, you're in for a treat. We have all sorts of perks, not just from James, but also from Adrian Tchaikovsky, Bradley Beaulieu, Juliet E. McKenna, Jen Williams, Anna Smith-Smark, RJ Barker, and Richard K. Morgan as well, already there for donors. And we also have going on a special auction featuring some super duper rare books from horror maestro Stephen Graham Jones. These books are so rare that you cannot even find them on eBay. So they're all set up on the Pixel Project's fundraising page. Let me share with you guys a slide where, here we go. So if you want to donate, please go to the Rally Up page. It's bit.ly/up 2019. To bid on Stephen Graham Jones' first edition books, it's bit.ly/charity auction 2019. Now the chat box moderators are going to be putting the links in the chat box, so go click on those. And if you want to find out more about campaign, go to bit.ly/readforpixels. We have sessions coming up with more authors. Next week. Right. So I think all that remains is for me to say. Oh, actually, I'm going to ask James. Do you have any announcements to make?
I have two. First off, the final book in the Blood Red trilogy, Bloodlines, is coming out in October from Earthling Publications. That's earthlingpub.com. It is currently only a signed limited edition, I believe starting at $40. And secondly, I'll be appearing at the Merrimack Valley Halloween Book Festival 1 month from now in Haverhill, Massachusetts, at the Public Library, along with about 50 other authors, including Christopher Golden, Hilary Monahan, and several other names you recognize without any problem. And you can find out about that on Facebook at the Merrimack Valley Halloween Book Festival.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, James, for being with us. And thank you, everybody, for watching, for participating, for asking your questions. And please do go and check out the Rally Up fundraising page and get yourself some amazing exclusive author goodies. So I'll say thank you and goodbye, everyone, from good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. And thank you, James.
Thanks very much.